So if you don't mind, we'll go backwards a little bit and start with verse 16 in chapter 4 and do those 4 or so verses to finish up that part. And then we'll look at the allegory in 21 and following. So if you don't mind, I will read starting with verse 16. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? As I mentioned last week, this passage turns very personal for Paul. The relationship he had with these Galatians, because of whatever his physical infirmity is, he's now talking about that. And in light of that experience that he had previously with them, he's asking them a very personal question. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? And of course, we need to be thinking about everything we've been talking about in this book, going back to chapter 1 and all that. Paul has been very harsh in his criticism of the people who have become, in effect, his enemies, certainly his adversaries, and they're arguing about the stuff we've been talking about, whether or not you have to become Jewish. If you're a Gentile background believer, do you need to become Jewish in order to become a Christian? And we're now getting into some of the implications of what that means. We've talked about the law and the role of the law and all that. Now, when it turns personal, we get into some kind of difficult topics, I think. So, have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? I want us to hear the pathos in this portion. They make much of you, but for no good purpose. They want to exclude you so that you may make much of them. You hear the kind of parallel reversal there. They make much of you, so you'll make much of them. That's significant. It is good to be made much of for a good purpose at all times, and not only when I am present with you. We can kind of read between the lines here, the subtle message underneath the surface. My little children, for whom I am again in the pain of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I were present with you now and could change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. And as I mentioned, sorry, I just goofed up my camera. As I mentioned last week, he has changed his tone. This sounds more pleading and less just openly reprimanding back in chapter 1. Remember that. And then his story about his interactions with Peter in chapter 2, or at the end of chapter 1. So more pleading now. Let me share my screen. They make much of you, but for no good purpose. This was in last week's video, but I thought, given the variety of terms used in the different translations, this might be a moment to look at the variety and get a bigger sense of what's going on. I also am very interested, if you have questions from last week, I know you talked a little bit perhaps, but if you do have questions, this is the time we'll kind of close the loop and you can raise the questions. But notice the variety of translations here. The NIV is very close. You can see the literal translation, they zealously seek you. The word zeal is at certain points in Paul's writings very important to him. He was zealous for the Lord. If you remember when we were looking at Philippians in chapter 3, when he's giving his own pedigree, he talks about being zealous for the Lord. So they zealously seek you. These Judaizers, according to Paul, zealously seek the Gentiles. For what purpose? The NIV says those people are zealous to win you over. Win you over to what? We've been looking at it, but there's again implication to what it means to be won over to this particular point of view. The English Standard Version follows the New Revised Standard. They make much of you. I like the Net Bible here. They court you eagerly. And then the New King James, they zealously court you. So a little bit more literal, but holding on to that idea of these Judaizers are sort of trying to cultivate favor with these Gentile believers for a particular purpose, which Paul says in verse 17 is to exclude them. Now, why would he say that if they're courting them? Why would he say why would he say they want to exclude you? So I asked the question, what is the issue here? This is one of those examples of where we have to slow down a little bit, notice the details, and mull things over, which means asking different sorts of questions.
Steve?
Yeah.
I got NIV, and it has something I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else in the Bible, or if I did, I didn't remember it. But it says what they want is to alienate you from us, comma. And the from us has little corner brackets like underneath it, like it was inserted. So, but they're apparently clarifying that they're wanting to alienate them away from Paul, right?
Right. Which is, from Paul's view, away from the gospel. There is a mixture, which I think is telling and worth our noticing, between the personal level here. Paul he's visibly angry at the beginning of the book. He's really upset about what's going on among these churches. He's upset with the people that are creating this problem from his point of view. It is inevitably personal. Paul feels like his work perhaps has been in vain. That's a lot of work, and he's paid the price for it. So it's personal at that level, but it's much more than personal, because it's actually about the spiritual condition of these people who have been, at least to some degree, under Paul's care. So the combination of very personal that we see here, but much more than personal. Okay, all that to say, Jim, is that the NIV is giving a lot of explanatory interpretation there. And those words in brackets, from you, says that those words are not in the Greek text. So here, as is commonly the case when translating from one language to another, you do have to interpret. You've got to fill in the blanks. Every version does this, but the alienate from you is the way they've interpreted that passage. So they're trying to cut Paul out of the picture and win these people over to their side. That would be one way of thinking about it. But then the question becomes, what are the stakes involved in going along with that culling of favor, cultivating of favor? Okay, any other thoughts or questions about that? Let me come back to this question then about what is the issue here then? I've tried to throw out a couple of thoughts here, but when you read this passage, what is the sense that you get about the issue? What is really driving Paul's determined rhetoric here?
Well, he's afraid they're listening to the other guys too much.
Yeah. He's going to lose them. And what happens if he loses them from his point of view?
They are lost.
Yeah. And I think we have to ask, does that in our day and time seem possible? This is a case of how we've been shaped to read the Bible in our context relative to how the Bible presents itself. Is it possible to be lost in the way that Paul seems to be suggesting here? It's a different gospel that these Judaizers are preaching. What do you think about that?
What I'm thinking now is that Paul can't, he's frustrated. He can't be with them. He's, and to get a letter from where he is to them probably takes months. And for them to get back to him, their communication is so slow and life goes on. And these Judaizers, these other people, the world is surrounding them all at all times. And he can only be there for snippets.
Yeah, so it feels a little bit like the deck is stacked against him, maybe, because they are there on site, as it were, and he isn't. Yeah. Not fair.
Is it also that these people that were trying to get the Galatians to more closely follow Jewish law, that Paul would be concerned that if the Judaizers led the Galatians into their own group, that they would more channel their energy to be Jews than followers of Jesus, and therefore no longer be a disciple of Jesus.
Right. Right. So there is something very core to the Christian faith here. And it's helpful, therefore, to go back and look at chapter 3, for example. If you were just on your own, when you have time and you're thinking about this, to see how we've moved on, and we're talking about this passage, but everything we've been reading and working on comes with us. And so to go back and look again at how Paul describes the purpose of the law and how it lines up with the rest of the law, the story of Abraham in the book of Genesis. We have to remember that Torah, law, includes the first 5 books. So Genesis is part of Torah. And if I could say it this way, Paul, as a Torah scholar, has seen something that he's now saying the Jewish nation, Israel, went blind to it. We so focused on the purity of national identity that we lost track of part of the Bible. And it's a pretty important part. Once in a while, for us to go backwards and look at where we've been in our reading, that's a good thing to do, and it can help us realize the undertones, the coloring of what we're concentrating on right now. What's going to happen, do you think, taking the New Revised Standard word here? They want to exclude you. Can we try to play out and imagine if the Judaizers get their way, what will it mean for the church, for the churches in Galatia? How would the church look in Galatia? I'm asking you to speculate a little bit.
Well, I guess I'm almost thinking it depends on how far it goes, but if it goes, I mean, it's like it would almost go away. They would become Jewish. I don't know if they would even remember, you worry that they would even remember the reason that they had gotten together in the first place is to become, worshipers of Christ, rather than be Jewish.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we play this out over time, nobody can predict the future, but there is a logic to the ideas that are presented here. And the logic then suggests that over time, what would happen is that Christ becomes less and less central to the picture of what holds this community together. Yeah.
I may not be getting something, I guess, but it seems to me like that if the reason that Judaizers would want them to become circumcised is so that they can include them. So I'm not catching what it means, why Paul is turning that around and saying, no, it's not inclusion, it's exclusion. How will they be excluded?
I think it's a good question. So this goes another way. So we have more than one thing can apply here, but we could also look down the road and see that what happens is that the Jewish identity takes priority. And then who's the real Jew? Right? Who are the real Jews? Well, the real Jews are the ones who were born Jewish. And these converts, they're latecomers. They're not quite up to speed. They're coming out of this heathen background. They're impure. They're unclean. Yeah, they're converts now, and we welcome them, but they're not really Jewish.
Will be making that argument already because they're not really circumcised.
Did the class hear that?
Sorry, I was just saying, couldn't they already be making that argument? Because what they're saying to the Christians, the Gentile Christians, is you're not really Christians because you're not circumcised and believing in Christ. And so if they believe in Christ and are not circumcised, then the same argument is you're not a real Christian, because we've just said that the mark of being a real Christian by the Judaizers is Christ and the law.
Yeah, I think that's right. But now we're on the other side of it. Let's say, again, we're speculating, we're playing out a scenario, but now we're on the other side of it. So they have believed in Christ, they've been baptized, they've also received circumcision, and they're doing what they can to keep the law. Now we're in this is the community that's been established on terms that Paul says fundamentally undermine the gospel. So we talked about Rod's insight about how that would go. Here's another way it would go, I think, that in terms of the group makeup, you've got one group of people that are kind of in charge because they're the real, they're the legit, they're the bona fide, and these others are latecomers. So I think one of the implications for the eagerly courting, I'm looking at the text we're looking at for this moment, looking at that, the 2 or 3 verses there, why are they eagerly courting these people? Well, it might just be sincere evangelistic interest, or it might be getting away, it might be a way of getting control of the narrative once again so that we can protect Jewish identity. And that's a sincere concern. If you're Jewish, to protect the Jewish identity, it is often attacked. We should be empathetic to them for wanting to protect Jewish identity. But once they get these people in the body and get things kind of lined up the way they think it ought to be, now we still have this kind of first class, second class citizen feeling within the body because, well, you know, these Gentiles, they're converts. But so who gets to be the leader in the community? Who gets to be the officer? Who gets to be the one that helps people understand real Christianity? I think this is part of the undertone to this little section that we're looking at here. If these Judaizers are making much of the Gentiles to get them to convert according to the Judaizing way, that undermines the gospel. It also sets up for an inherent flaw in the makeup of the community. This is where we might go back to 3:28 and 29, for example. In Christ, there really is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. This doesn't wash out those cultural markers, but in Christ, there really is no first or second class citizenship. There really is none. But in order for this to be a reality, we have to stay laser focused on Christ and the gospel that has come to us through him. Any other modification starts to unwind or unravel what has been created.
Steve?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that you're pointing out that there's no class distinction among Christians. And I'm
No class, say again.
You're pointing out that there's no class distinction among Christians.
Correct.
And yet, what went through my mind when I heard that was, if someone today were attending church or considering a conversion to some denomination or something, pretty hard to look at that without a feeling of classes within that organization.
Right.
And that,
Yes.
that's not any one group. That's pretty much the way they all seem to work.
Right. Which is a problem, isn't it? This is why church history is turning out the way it is. So, for example, the United Methodist Church as a whole is a middle-class white denomination. The reason there are Pentecostal denominations is in part because people who wind up in Pentecostal churches tended to be poorer back when they got started, early 1900s, poorer, less formally educated, and by that time, Methodism had achieved respectability as a middle-class, well-educated denomination. There's always variety, there's always qualification in my generalizations, but that's, yeah, American Christianity is stratified and it's divided up other ways. Now, the hard part of this is when we do want to worship in our heart language. So if you just try to mash everybody together culturally, that's hard too. That's really hard. So I just want to name the difficulty here, the challenge. But back to the previous point, we United Methodists generally are affluent, middle-class white folk with some variation. And so reading a book like James would be salutary for us to see what it says about the rich and the poor, and to understand what the Bible is actually telling us about social standing and all that goes with it. All that to say, there's a lot more going on in this passage. Once we start to dig into the details, you know, sort of, I'm trying to work on two angles here at the same time. Learning to read the Bible with this attention to detail opens up these topics for us, I think, in fresh and in some ways better ways. And then on the other hand, we're just trying to understand what's going on in this particular passage.
Like, also to me, this kind of reminds me, it seems like kind of a repeated theme in the Bible where the religious leaders totally get it wrong. Because of power and control, they go the opposite direction of where they should.
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm laughing and not instead of crying. I mean that, but I totally agree with you. It's the religious leaders often, because they're trying to maintain control. They tend to be the sticky wicket. Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
Steve,
Yeah, Bill.
I'm trying to reconcile some of the ideas I'm hearing with the translation that I'm using.
Okay.
I'm using, what do I call it? New American Standard Bible.
Hmm.
And that's maybe frustrating to everybody else, but I started doing some Bible study 40 years ago, and I liked it, and it suited me pretty well. But anyway, that's a prelude to saying, I want to read what my Bible says in verse 17. I think 16 is just like everybody else. 16 is, have I therefore become your enemy by telling you the truth? 17 is, they eagerly seek you, not commendably, but they wish to shut you out in order that you may seek them. Now, first glance, that seems to say they want to play hard to get and make it attractive to you and make it desirable and make it difficult for you to overcome some hurdles to join our in crowd. Does that make sense?
Yes. And by the way, the New American Standard Version is a very literal translation. So, and I use it regularly. I just didn't put it up here that time, but I'm glad you mentioned it. Would you read that again, verse 17?
Yeah, sure. They eagerly seek you, not commendably, but they wish to shut you out in order that you may seek them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes it very clear that the motive of the Judaizers is to maintain their position of privilege, if I could say it that way. And they are using then these Gentile believers. That's really harsh, but that's what Paul is working on here. What is going on? So it's personal. It will affect the group, the makeup of the group, the stratification of the group, and ultimately it undermines the gospel. So as we're seeing all through this book, Paul thinks we're onto something here that's really worth fighting about. And he's not mincing any words, as you can tell. Okay, let's go on. My little children, for whom I am again in the pain of childbirth, until Christ is formed in you. This brings us, I got a couple of questions and thoughts here, but it brings us to really to the point.
Fix the microphone problem.
What Paul really is worried about ultimately is becoming in Christ. So Christ is the key to this whole picture, and being in Christ, or in this case, reversing it until Christ is formed in you. So again, I'd like to ask us to think about how does this language resonate with you? How does it strike you until Christ is formed in you? What do you think about that? And then his audacious use of labor pains as a man. I wonder if anybody thought about that. So there you have it. What is your mind?
I'm going to interject. I bet you can hear me better now.
Yes,
Yeah,
much better.
we weren't using the microphone on the camera. We were using the laptop microphone. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, much better.
all is good now.
Yeah.
Steve, does it say little children in the Greek? Or is that?
Yeah. The Greek word is tekna, and it means a little child, or in plural, little children.
Okay.
Yeah. What does yours say, Bill?
my children.
Hmm.
And that could be a parental relationship, not the one who takes care of infants, by contrast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the point Paul's trying to get across here is the vulnerability of these Gentiles to those who are seeking to use them in a certain way. Okay, the Christ formed in you, and I've given you the Greek term there. What do you think of that? What came to your mind as you read? Okay. No. Joni's talking. It's now a class of one.
Sorry. I was thinking about Christ formed in you is sort of a lifetime work. It doesn't just happen, does it? And if it doesn't just happen, but it's a lifetime of submission to Christ, then that's a long time to be in labor.
Yeah, but yeah, it kind of makes that metaphor apt, though, doesn't it? Even though it may be presumptuous for a man to talk this way. Again, that's kind of a 21st century Western view. Joni says it doesn't bother her. I'm glad about that. But the metaphor is apt. I mean, we get a sense of the agony Paul is in, not to let these Galatians slip away into something less than Christian.
Doesn't it also mean that until implies it hadn't happened yet?
Right.
So it's an incomplete process at this point, at least Paul's view of where they are. And maybe that's the view of where he is too. But I mean, he apparently doesn't view them as totally where they need to be anyway.
Right. Yeah, that's a very common characteristics through all of the letters of Paul, really through the letters in the New Testament. We all need to grow, and we keep growing. Christ forming in us is a lifetime process.
Is formed in you guys.
Yeah, second person plural, you, right. Yeah. What would it look like, do you think, based on your knowledge of Scripture, for Christ to be formed in us?
Well, the new edition of the Christians is the Holy Spirit being inside of each individual person, and then learning through that, learning to communicate through the Holy Spirit, maybe as part of that.
Okay, good. So that takes us back to the beginning of chapter 3, where Paul asks, the only thing I want to learn from you is this: did you receive the Spirit by doing the works of the law? So receiving the Spirit, the work of the Spirit, now is an essential part of the picture of Christian discipleship. And I think, again, this may be too much my own apprehension, perhaps, but I think many United Methodists, knowing we've heard enough about charismatic things and faith healers and Pentecostals and all that, we're a little worried about talk of the work of the Spirit. But it's very clear in the New Testament that the work of the Spirit actually is what brings us into faith in Christ. And the ongoing work of the Spirit is really necessary for Christian growth. And so understanding what that work is, and sort of practicing awareness of it, I think is a place where many of us could grow. Thank you, Mark. Anybody else? Until Christ is formed in you.
I think it's about being comfortable doing what Christ wants us to do, to feed the hungry, to be kind to one another, to treat each other as ourselves, to pray daily, to all, I could go on and on.
Yeah. And it's all of that, right? You could go on, and it's all of it. It's all of a piece.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we have to feel comfortable with it. You have to feel comfortable in your own self to do that. If you're going to do it with vigor, with confidence.
Yeah, it has to be more than a sense of duty, right?
Absolutely.
Good. That's good.
And not just, and you're not out there doing it to show others.
Right.
Look how cool I am.
Yeah.
That's not it.
Yeah.
Well, but weren't the Jews kind of practicing their faith that, I mean, weren't they just following the laws and doing it as a sense of duty? Or, I mean, weren't they more that way, or were they doing it? They weren't doing it because they were filled with the Holy Spirit. They were law abiders.
That's such an interesting question. My sense of the picture in general is it is a mixed picture. There are Jews, plenty of Jews who love God, and they're really trying to do, they're motivated intrinsically to do it the right way. Well, in terms of external behavior, that kind of a solicitous attitude toward the law could look like they're just rule followers. We're pretty hard on the Pharisees, for example, but the Pharisees were absolutely committed to what they understood to be God's will. So I think even here's the interesting thing, at least in my mind. The interesting thing about this point is that sincere believers can get dreadfully off the path if we're not open and attentive to the work of the Spirit. We remain responsive as we keep reading and growing. If we settle into a kind of hardened mindset about things, we can be dreadfully sincere, intrinsically motivated, and get it wrong.
One of the things that it says here is that they make much of you so that you will make much of them. So it makes me think back on something that Steve said earlier about, they could have been so fiercely protecting Judaism that you quickly get off track. Okay, is it Judaism that you want to protect, or is it, is that God? Are you on the side of God, or are you on the side of something that's slightly not God anymore? I mean, it's like the organization or the identity has sort of taken the place of the real thing. And like maybe in this case, the real identity is being formed in Christ. It's not being formed into a proper Jew. So that regardless of the thing that actually motivates you, you've kind of lost sight, you've let slip, what the real thing is. And suddenly it becomes something else.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant with these kinds of examples, but I think the example is appropriate because I think in the United States, in our history, the history of our country is intimately connected to the Christian faith. I am not saying that we are a Christian nation. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying if you read the history of the United States, the Christian faith is very much involved in shaping this country. The downside of that truth is that it's easy for us to confuse or lose track of what is really Christian and what is American. And as soon as I say those words, I can start to sound unpatriotic to some people. As a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I'm required to ask this question. Because if Jesus is really Lord, then even the United States, with our wonderful history and our government, we need to yield our hearts to the true King and not settle for something less. So just as an example, I think this is hard for us to think about this, but it's kind of, it behooves us to think about it. What is Christian and what is American? Yeah, so that can go lots of different ways. Maybe I'll stop with that. But I think it's a challenge because the United States story has been so interwoven with the Christian faith, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. But it has some drawbacks and some unintended consequences.
Well, Steve, from a historical perspective, before the United States, are there other examples of countries that weren't just a religion dominated from the state situation?
Again, interesting question. I think the quickest and best answer is no, which raises a number of other important topics. But here's the thing: some viewpoint, philosophy, ideology will win out in a society. And people who are part of that society will then learn their identity in reference to whatever that ideology is. The best example on this point would be when people began to realize that the Soviet Union, as officially atheist, still had a religion, something that had many characteristics of religion, and that is Marxism. It was all encompassing. It demanded 100% allegiance and all that goes with that. People were shaped in that ideology in a way. So my point here is, there's no country that's ever been truly able to have a variety of viewpoints and still hold together. Let me back up. An endless variety of viewpoints and still hold together as a people or a society.
Has that
And
been
so,
the root of,
yeah.
is that the root of a lot of civil wars? I mean, Steve, is that kind of where you go with that? I mean, that just.
Civil wars related to religion?
Well, yeah, or just, yeah, that fraction you're talking about, there's different opinions. And so does it, in some cases, not necessarily civil, but you can probably go back and well, people don't have the same agreement, same path they're moving down. Yeah, I think Afghanistan's going to be interesting to watch, to see how that develops and evolves. I mean, this country had its own civil war for various reasons. I mean,
Right. Yeah, and religion of some sort has often been involved in the conflict. Whether it's the Christian faith or some other religion. I mean, when Islam got started in the 7th century, and as it developed and took territory and all that, once the first generation of leaders is gone, now there's a power struggle for who the true Islam is. So even it's always going to happen. And so the Taliban in Afghanistan, with reasserting a particular understanding of Sunni Islam, it's going to be interesting to watch. And even in the United States, the United States has done the best of any nation, I think, at a truly open kind of democratic freedom for people to follow their own conscience and still be part of a society. That's a real challenge. We've got to have something that holds us together, coupled with individual freedom of conscience. And so it's an ongoing experiment that we may be slipping. Now I'm opinionating here, I'm editorializing, but we may be slipping further away from that vision than we realize.
But didn't some of that due to less tolerance for one another, probably?
Mhm.
Yeah. Not only, unless the less tolerance is connected to a view that those other people are really bad people. Not just that we disagree, that we have different viewpoints, but they are evil people. And that's somebody's mentioned Facebook. Yeah, this is exactly what's happening on Facebook. If you don't agree with me, you are an evil person.
Yeah.
Just a quick personal word. I know we need to quit, but now that we've moved back to Kansas, we're back among people that, I've known some of these Methodist preachers up here for 40 years. And with some of them, I've become their enemy somehow. It's just weird. It's weird. But that's what's happened to our country.
One thing I heard this week that's kind of related is that I heard that Israel is the only country God chose, but America is the only country that chose God.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, the United States remains a much more openly religious nation than any other modern Western nation, for sure. You get to a place like India, for example, with Hinduism, that's really the dominant faith in India, and they're having the same issues. There is a kind of cultural Hinduism that the people who want to control India are insisting that cultural Hinduism stays in place. And so Muslims and Christians in certain provinces, that's not the right word. Yeah, certain states in India are really under the gun. Okay, well, we didn't get to 21 through 31, so we got to talk about the allegory next week, but 21 through 31 is especially complex thinking going on, and so we'll get to that next week. Okay, anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, let me ask if it would be possible if you could do something, Steve.
Sure.
I'm beginning to think we're going into detail on Galatians. I mean, real detail. But I'm starting to lose sight of the forest.
Okay.
And I wonder if it might be possible on one of your screens next time, if you could step back and give us an overall outline of the book to give us some context. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, glad to do it. We have gotten into detail. Ironically, I've been trying to move us along a little bit, but I'm the one who bogs us down then, because there's just all these. Here's the thing about the nuances and picking up shades of meaning turn out to be really important. So, but I'll do that, Bill. We'll kind of take a step back at the beginning of next week and get the big picture again. Keep that in mind. Yeah.
We will miss next week. We will we'll be somewhere where we may not get great internet. We're going to go out to Yellowstone and Grand Tetons and stuff.
Woo!
Nice.
Enjoy. Safe travel.
Oh, and I forgot to mention at the Sewards are in Austin for a baby shower. That's why they're not here.
Oh, fun.
Great.
And your video last week was good, Steve. I know you're kind of down on it, but it's a good video.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
It didn't seem
Thank you.
incoherent. It didn't seem incoherent at all. I thought it was very well done.
Well, thank you.
You could have said, "I'm real proud of the way that worked out," and I would have believed you.
Those words don't ever come out of Steve Rankin's mouth about any of his own work.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's pray. Oh, Lord, it's so great to get back together in real time, and we're always grateful for your presence and your teaching us the true way, the way of discipleship. So we ask you to help us flex where we need to flex and get tight where we need to get tight, and we'll take it one day at a time. We continue to remember all those who have needs in our midst. We know that the contents of our hearts are always open to you, and we're glad to know that we can rest in your goodness. For that, we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
And
I will add one prayer request. Some of y'all may have heard this area, mainly kind of west of us, got some pretty heavy rains, and
That's funny.
yeah, we only got 3 or 4 inches. I mean, for us, it's not a big deal, but a little wet garage down in the basement. But other than that, they're really suffering. It's going to take them a long time to recover. So prayers for them in Canton and not Henderson,
Haywood County.
Haywood County.
Haywood
County.
North
Okay.
Carolina.
Yeah.
All right.
all right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Y'all
We'll
soon.
see ya.